want to welcome everybody for joining today's webinar introducing log management and SIEM technology as part of the Awareness Technologies offerings. My name is Kristen, and I'll be walking you through the presentation today. I also have a colleague who I'm going to turn it over to later on in the call who's going to actually do more of the demo and answer any of the technical questions that come about. And we'll also answer any other questions or concerns if you want to in a one-on-one conversation after this. We'll provide some contact information, and we can set that up after the call. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll talk a little bit about the new product offering that we have. So one of the questions that we've had right off the bat is just some curiosity about why we're adding on this product at this time. And one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about is, why the log management SIEM. So for us, we've been really focused on end customer data, end user information, and we want to be able to let you see more than just end user data. We want you to be able to see the patterns across your network and things that are basically more behavioral patterns. And we really want to be able to provide something that completes the picture of internal and external threats. So with that said, we'll take a little step back and kind of show you how this completes the picture, at least in our mind. So right now, this is kind of what it looks like we're able to do for you. So we're looking at the remote employees, we're looking at mobile computing, we're looking at those desktops and those laptops, and we're seeing things like user session activity. So after you log in, the things that a user is doing. And we're seeing local access on that computer, what they're doing when they're on that computer. So that's what we're able to see. How this kind of complements that and how that enhances it is really, it's going to be looking at things outside of that end user area. So we have something on here showing you IDS and firewall and log management and SIEM. And basically showing you things like all access attempts, not just user session activity and user session attempts, but all access attempts. All file access, insider and outsider information. So I just wanted to set up the stage there a little bit, explain how this fits in with us, really how it completes the picture if you're concerned from a sensitive information standpoint, how that would enhance it. So I'm going to turn this over. Actually, let me just change the presenter to not and let him take over from here. So can you hear us?
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Not a problem.
I appreciate it. Good day to everybody. Thank you for taking time out of what must inevitably be a really busy schedule to listen to what we have to say. So given that we're all busy here in IT, the 40-hour work week seems like a laugh. There's hardly any week that goes by that strictly adheres to that anyway. And we all know that IT security is a big deal. We've heard it dinned into our heads so many times, the Targets of the world, the Edward Snowdens of the world, and so on. But we're obviously busy. There are so many threats, so many issues, so many changes. And it's not there's only one thing that we got to worry about, thinking about, in a typical environment, Active Directory, firewalls, as Kristen mentioned, different types of network devices, wireless, antivirus, patching. File systems, of course, which is where a lot of the crown jewels are stored, and so on. In the meantime, of course, we're trying to have the semblance of a life. So the question really becomes, how do you get the early warning system? How do you get this all under control in a relatively short period of time? So in 10 minutes each of what's happening right now and what happened yesterday, the objective of this new offering from Awareness Technologies is to get you wise as to what's going on. From a what's happening right now perspective, what are the alerts that I should be paying attention to? Is somebody awake and watching all of the threats and the anomalies across the entire network? Can I get a single pane of glass, please, so that I don't have to go to 15 places just to see what's going on? And in terms of yesterday, the most common questions that we try to answer are the 4 W's, who, what, where, and when. Who accessed the applications, who accessed the files, because you know what happens when it turns out that a file was deleted or accessed inappropriately, and you walk around trying to determine who, and the only answer you get back, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. and it's kind of difficult at that point to figure out what specifically happened. Also, the so-called insider threat, the people that have the keys to the kingdom are the ones that have the. So if their credentials are stolen or if they turn rogue, would you know about this kind of thing? And how can you know it quickly without having to have an arm and a leg cut off? And this then is the context diagram of the new offering. At the bottom of the picture are all of the assets that we have that are able to put out security information. We're talking about users, IT administrators, assets like servers in particular, applications, databases, virtualization pieces of equipment, a very common thing now in pretty much every IT environment, and of course all of the network devices. They're putting out security information in different formats. For example, Windows will do it with a Windows event log style, but then firewalls will do it with a syslog, and a antivirus might actually write it as a text file. You might get applications like Exchange and SharePoint, each of which have their own funny method of providing this kind of info. So the objective of this offering is to be able to gather all of it in one place, no matter what the style is, no matter what the format is, and enable fundamentally three kinds of functions: alerting, searching, and reports. So when something happens, you want to be able to recognize that as a problem and then be able to say it. So if you've looked around, the billboards that are advertising up on the different interstates, since 9/11, there's been a statement that says, if you see something, say something. So this is the log manager offering that sits there never taking a break because it's a piece of software, and it will always be awake and alert, and if it sees something, it'll say something to you in any one of different methods, maybe by email if you prefer that, or by opening up a ticket in your help desk, or by paging you, or any one of another number of other methods. Also, the data is being kept with us, and so therefore it's indexed and available for searching after the fact, and there's a number of reports that you can run or have run on a scheduled basis that will help you to answer some of those 4W questions: who, what, when, and where. What this test done, what this then does for you is it allows you to, first of all, improve your security, but also if you're subject to any kind of regulatory compliance, maybe you're in the retail business and PCI DSS is a problem that you need and have an auditor coming out to audit you, or you're in healthcare and HIPAA, or you're in banking, or you're in state and local, or you're in government and you're thinking FISMA. So for all of these, there are prepackaged reporting available that can help you to satisfy your auditor. Of course, everybody is being asked to do more with less. IT budgets are either being held constant or shrinking, and there's always a hiring freeze in effect. In any case, it's kind of hard to find those talented people. So by having this type of work be done by automation, it can really help out in terms of being able to accomplish that mandate of not having to add another body to the mix. And it also, by the way, because of the single pane of glass, gives you that 360-degree view. So what are the challenges that we're addressing through the new offering? From a security perspective, worrying about both the insider problem as well as the external, and I'll show you all this in a demo in a couple of minutes. If you have a compliance mandate, the ability to be able to provide the auditors with the kind of information they need, and then from an operations perspective, the ability to do more without necessarily adding stuff, and to be able to stretch your IT budget, something that really everybody is most interested in. How does this work? It's quite simple. Logs from all of these different types of systems, and we support a wide variety of systems, flow into the product, and then it will, after having processed them, decide whether an alert needs to be sent out, because what's the see something, say something part, and or whether we should be doing reports for compliance, for operations, because you asked us to, because it's scheduled, for management, for staff, or any of those kinds of things. Incidents, and we look at the alerts that have come in and filter them through the product's knowledge base in order to identify what really merits your attention now. Because the last thing we're interested in is being the boy that cried wolf, It gets old pretty fast. And then, of course, having received all that data, index it so that you can search. So if you're fond of Google or you're fond of Bing or you're fond of Yahoo, and searching is a way that you prefer to get through this stuff, well, all of the stuff will be indexed so that you'll be able to get to it really quickly. Easy to implement, easy to use, installs very quickly, has a very wide knowledge platform available to it, and is really shipping as a virtual appliance. It's a piece of software, not a piece of hardware, and there is no database requirement. So pretty much everything that you want is included. Everything that you need is included. All you're going to supply from your side is a Windows platform, and it can be either a real Windows box or it can be a virtual instance on VMware or Hyper-V, where this thing will install and get going. Licensing is a straightforward, very simple approach, and that's something that Kristen will cover shortly. The key capabilities were processing, automating the processing of all of these, but let me show you what I really mean by walking you through a demo. So here I am in the product itself. And by the way, I know we said we do questions by and by, but if you do have questions as you see this stuff, please feel free to type it out using the GoToMeeting interface, and we'll get to it just as quickly as we can. So this is the graphical user interface for the product. Everything is browser-based. All you need on your side is something like Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome, and you'll be able to get in and see whatever this thing has to say. If it wants to wake you up and alert you that something's happened, you'll receive that notification in whatever notification method you've chosen, whether you want to receive an email when that condition happens, or whether you want to get paged via a text message, or whether you want a ticket to be opened in your help desk if you have such a beast, and so on. The front portion of this product is essentially showing you incidents. What's happened across your network that you need to be aware of. And again, because of risk privileges, we're trying to escalate and show you in these buckets. Here are criticals, here are serious, and so on down the line. And if you float on any of these things, you're going to be able to see. So for instance, if I look at a domain controller and I clicked on it, I see that I have a couple of incidents that are worth exploring, right? On the one hand, I see that someone's been added, user by the name of Anderson has been added by an administrator called Kenneth and made an admin. And this happened at 7:08 this morning, right? We're sitting at about 2:20 Eastern. It's a big deal. We don't know that this is a problem, but since this is such an important thing, after all, administrative users have all kinds of power, right? So if someone's being added, presumably it's something that you should know about. So here, this is and then of course we also see that there was an attempt at inserting a USB, and that was defeated by Event Tracker. So from a server perspective for this domain controller, these were the important, critical, serious things that happened. If I looked at some network device, for instance, Kristen mentioned an intrusion prevention system, and there's one from Cisco in this particular network, and you notice that it's issued a SQL injection alert. Well, this is the sort of thing that you probably need to be alerted to. No doubt the prevention system, the IPS, has probably cut it off at the pass, as it were. But should you not know about it? At least should it not be in a dashboard so that you're mindful, specifically where has it come from, who is doing this kind of thing. So again, these kinds of things are available to you within the interface. So here are a couple from an Exchange server. We see that maybe an important service, the Microsoft Exchange Transport Service, is not running. I mean, gee, that could potentially impact your entire Exchange and therefore your entire email, and that's something that you need to be mindful of. So this is the dashboard that shows you not just the top problems that we've got in terms of criticality. By the way, a note to mention, this is a demo environment, so we deliberately make things break here. In your production environment, I expect it's a lot more nailed down, and so you see a lot fewer things. But of course, we're trying to show you what the product's capable of. So not surprisingly, there are a lot of problems here for us to look at. The top 5 incidents by count, we see users have been added and deleted, Active Directory. There's been some changes in group policy. There's been a change to the Cisco firewall configuration, which is always kind of a big deal, right? So we've got 21 changes. Would you believe it? 21 changes to a Cisco firewall. So for instance, Bruce W. has executed the failover reset on this ASA that's sitting somewhere in the lab environment. It may not be such a big deal because it's in the lab environment, but if it's a production, that's certainly something that you should pay attention to because firewalls guard entire segments of the network. Risks by count, top 5 systems by count. For instance, I see a server by the name of accounting, which has only maybe one incident. But because accounting is such a critical server and it contains maybe the crown jewels, financial info, I might want to see what that's all about. And what I observe here is that there's been a a USB insert, and it's happened by Chris Mills. Now, in this environment, I happen to know Chris Mills is a member of the finance group. And so this doesn't really cause me any kind of grief. But because it's such a critical server with all this kind of financial info, anything that happens to that server is interesting to me. And so therefore, this is being brought to my attention. It's also worth noting that at 9 p.m., when this kind of activity occurs, that's definitely a cause for concern. I mean, I don't know about your in a particular organization, but I can say to you that there are very few where the finance group is actually working at 9 p.m. IT, yeah, probably, but finance, not so sure about that. So that would be something to maybe think about. Same kind of info, but now presented in tabular fashion, right? So you're seeing that the sorting is occurring on the basis of risk, and we saw this particular SQL injection alert. We saw it before. We're seeing it again. It's showing up at the very tippy top of our screen. And as I look down, for instance, I see that a serious problem is that a file was accessed, and it was accessed on a file server. You see this file server right here, server 6 file. And who is it that performed the access? Was somebody by the name of Anderson. And what exactly is it that he saw? Well, it looks like he saw a important file that contains maybe valuable info. So this is something that I might maybe want to explore a little bit further. It doesn't say it failed, so most likely he was privileged and allowed to do it. But if I go back to my dashboard, if you recall from a minute ago, we had these criticals and I was looking at a domain controller. And you recall what I saw back there? That this user called Anderson had in fact been added to a administrator group by somebody called Kenneth, right? So from a perspective, one of the scenarios that this would uncover in my mind is, hold on a minute, this guy was added to the administrators group at 7:08, and then when I go back and look at file accessed, he's accessing at 7:19. He's accessing payroll.xlsx. Well, that certainly bears some kind of investigation, wouldn't you say? So again, by having this network view across all of the assets in your organization, you're able to identify potentially problems that might occur. So let's look at reports. This is another important feature of the product. Is all that data having been received and stored, there are a number of reports that are enabled. So for instance, I might be interested in logons after hours, right? I mean, it depends on what after hours means to you. Are you a 24/7 hospital? If you are, then maybe there is no after hours. But then if you're a banking institution and your day ends at 6 p.m., somebody logging at 9 p.m. might be a concern. So we for example, see Chris Mills had logged in at 9. Oh, you might remember from the USB insert that happened on accounting that Chris Mills was somebody that was a member of that group. So sure enough, on accounting, we know that he logged in and it happened after hours. And there are a number of others. I see Yasmin, I see Brian Smith, and so on. And this might be normal, this might not be. But again, the point is that these reports exist and are available for you to preview in one single place. Let's take a look at files. Who saw which particular file, and maybe we want to take a look at failed accesses, people who are trying to open files but didn't necessarily have the privilege. So for instance, Brian Smith, we saw him before, has tried to open this file again on a file server but didn't succeed because didn't have the privilege apparently. The question becomes, why did he do that? And also we see somebody else called Chappell trying to access some kind of info. How about successful, right? Is that something you can do? Yeah, sure. Once auditing has been turned on, Event Tracker receives all of these logs and then is able to provide these kinds of reports. So you see sorted by user, Beverly, Brian, Smith, Charles, Dan, etc. What sorts of files have they been successful at at accessing? So all of these kinds of reports are available to you right there within the system. Now you might say to yourself, "Oh, but wait, I don't necessarily have a Windows file server. What I have is a NetApp filer." Well, no problem. We support that as well. So for instance, here off of a NetApp filer, reports are shown to you. We've integrated that within the system. And we can see right here, for instance, who are the users, what file, where did they come from? These are the IP addresses they came from. This is the machine they accessed. These are the kinds of files that they touch. This is the domain. These are the users, P. Smith, Mark, J. Stos. And then I've got details here. So if I were interested to know specifically, what was addressed by Mark, this is the file that he opened on the NetApp device. So regardless of where your data is sitting, you have the ability to do all of these things. And there's a bunch of other stuff we talked about, for instance, the Cisco IDS, right? You saw that there was a SQL injection alert. Well, here's a report that's telling us, again, summary. These are the kinds of alerts that the IDS, there's my doom, there's generic SQL injection, and then there's details here. So if you were interested, you recall that the SQL injection we saw was most likely one of these, right? So you can sort these in any way you like. Again, because these are in Excel, you have the ability to play Excel games on this in any way that you might feel like and see specifically what's going on. So again, whether it's the kind of coverage that you have with this product is quite extensive. Here, for example, is a short list of the types of log sources for which there is coverage. There's more than 2,000 different operating systems that are available, all sorts of products that produce this kind of info for which knowledge is already available in the system from all of these vendors in all of these different formats. Right? So whether it's a flat file or it's appearing in Windows 2003 or 2008 or 12 format, whether it's showing up as syslog classical or via TCP, whether it's SNMP, or it's coming out of IIS, or it's XML, or it's inside a database like Oracle or SQL, or it's a flat file of some sort, all of these things can be processed and managed and handled by this product. So, I mean, I could go on and on in terms of what this thing's capable of, but I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. And Kristen, I'm going to turn this back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, so please do, if you haven't started, type in any questions that you might have in the questions area. There are a few that came in, so we'll go ahead. I'll read those off and we can get started with those. But please feel free to ask any questions as we're reviewing this. We'll spend some time doing that. So I do have a question here, which is it's asking basically what the requirements would be to get this installed, so the system requirements.
Oh, sure. As I mentioned, this product is a piece of software. It ships in a couple of different models. You can either get it as an MSI package, in which case you can install it on a Windows 7 workstation, or ideally on a 2008 R2 or a 2012 server. It'll also run happily on a 2003 if you happen to have one of those. The second form that it ships in is as a virtual appliance. So it can ship as a .ova, meaning if you have Hyper-V, if you have VMware's hypervisor there, it'll ship as a virtual appliance package, or it can ship in the Microsoft Hyper-V format, which is a VHD is what it's called. So those are the methods, but from a system requirements perspective, anything from a Win 7 a Pro on up, if it's a very small environment, a workstation class machine does the job. If it's a larger environment, 20 or more servers, then possibly a Windows Server would be a useful platform to install it on.
Great. Thank you. We have another question, which is, do we have to set up all the files that are sensitive and those that will trigger an alert, such as payroll.xls?
Great question. So the answer is that the way this product will determine whether the file has been touched or not touched is via audit records. Auditing is something that's part and parcel of most OSs. For example, I was showing you payroll.xls, and that came off of a Windows file share. So Microsoft has the ability to enable auditing, to turn on auditing for any file folder, and then under that for any asset, and under that for any action, whether you opened it successfully or you only want audits in case they didn't open it successfully, things of that sort, meaning success audits and failure audits. So one of the precursors to be able to get all of that info is to make sure that auditing is enabled appropriately on these devices. And that's also true, by the way, of the NetApp. So you saw that I was showing you some NetApp logs. Well, there again, NetApp has the option to turn on auditing. So when a user touches it and succeeds, or touches it and fails to open it, or writes it and changes it or quits, then these will cause the necessary events to be generated. Because of group policy, if you're in a Windows environment, this is something that can be done very quickly from your domain controller and done in one consistent set. So you don't really have to go about to each and every single file store and then worry about each of it one by one by one by hand. That would simply not be viable at all. Instead, there are some guidelines that are available both from Microsoft as well as from us that tell you, if you are interested in your 2003 or a 2008 type domain, what's the typical kind of auditing that you need to turn on. You're talking about 10 minutes of work, but you're talking about 10 minutes of careful work. You're talking about 10 minutes of work by somebody that knows your environment, because this isn't something to be done lightly. But once you're done, and the rest of it is all managed, handled by the product.
Great. There was a question here that's asking if the functionality is installed with a standard InterGuard install, or if it's a separate install. It would have to be a separate install than the InterGuard MSI that we send out, I believe. There's a question here that says there's still a little fuzzy on the deployment. So it says there is an MSI for Windows and an appliance for, say, VMware. Is the appliance essentially the same as the Windows agent? Does this all check in with your servers, or is the appliance the central repository?
Okay, I see that I wasn't very clear in explaining that. So there's two portions to this. There's a console or a manager piece, and then there's optionally an agent piece. And I stress the agent piece is optional. So the console or the manager piece gets installed in one place, and that's available either as a virtual appliance like a VMware OVA, or it's available as an MSI package. So if you already have a Windows server available that can act as the manager or the console for this, you'd simply install this product on that 2003, 2008, whatever. Separately, it now needs to receive, it's sitting there in one place, right, somewhere in your network. It now needs to receive all of this interesting info from all of the places where the files exist, or the people exist, or the servers exist, and so on. There's a couple of ways of doing it. Either we can install an agent on those servers that would find the events and send it back to us, or the central agent, the central console that you installed, would reach out and poll on a periodic basis. Or if you're a network device like a Cisco or something, you simply configure it to send the logs over to our central manager or console. So again, two parts to it: a manager or console part one time, and then either agents or some mechanism to get this information from all of the different endpoints. And there's different methods depending on the endpoint. Cisco is one way, Windows is another way, Linux is another way, Juniper is another way, NetApp is another way, and so on. Hopefully that made it clear. If not, please ask, and I'd be happy to clarify some more.
Great, thank you. There's a question here that says, for SQL Server, for SQL Server, does it track who accessed what database, who created or deleted a table, for example?
Very good question. So schema changes is something that we will almost always track, right? So someone dropped a database, someone changed the schema, someone logged in, someone logged out. These things are usually always done, and typically this is ideally done by a small little agent software that's installed on the SQL Server itself. And it will detect all of these things and communicate the information back to the central console where the alerts will occur. What's much less rare is who accessed the database for read or write purposes. It can be done also, but this is a little bit more, I mean, it happens much more frequently. So in your typical database, schema changes are a rare deal. I mean, they should not be happening much at all, especially in a production database. But on the other hand, accessing the database to read or to write data, well, that happens a million times a day. So it's usually the case that schema changes and things that you mentioned, such as adding a database and so on, administrative activity, that we will always monitor. However, if you're interested in access info, that needs to be done with care. It can be done for sure, but it needs to be done with care because it's such a voluminous activity.
Great. Let's see, there's another question that's asking if there are tools to analyze the environment before onboarding on the site, at the site.
Yeah, certainly. There are a number of tools that are available, including the kinds of logs you're getting, the volume you're getting, and they all go toward planning. With this technology, as with a lot of other IT stuff, you live or die by your plan, right? If you fail to prepare, you can almost pretty much prepare to fail. That's the old slogan, and that's very true in this case because if you don't know what kinds of logs you're going to get, what volume you're going to get, what's important, who's who in the zoo, under what conditions should you be alerting, then either you'll wind up with alert fatigue with 150 alerts every second, which will get old really fast, or when the problem really occurs, nothing's configured, now you never hear about it, and then weeks later you find out, and then there's hell to pay. So it's really all about the planning. So planning goes to a number of things, including log volume, the number of devices that are reporting in, what your retention policy should be, how your auditing should be set up, who has access, under what conditions you have access, why are you doing this in the first place, when should you be interested in being alerted, what sorts of reports do you like, and so on. So sure, there is a variety of resources available before onboarding if that is of interest.
Great. Someone's asking if this can be used at an insurance agency.
Oh, certainly. If you have, I mean, it's most likely that the technology that you're using, and I'm putting up the list of the common technologies that we see, are if you can find your technology in this, and if not, then the problem really is we ran out of space on the slide, then you can surely use it. The question really is, what are you looking to do? I assume you're trying to solve the problems that we outlined at the start of the presentation, which is you want to get a handle on security, you want to see what's going on internally and externally, and perhaps as an insurance agency, you may be subject to some sort of audit. If the answer is yes for any of those things, then sure, absolutely.
Great. There's a question about the interface, if it's separate from the InterGuard dashboard. It is for now, at least. It's going to remain separate, so you would have potentially two locations to log into, but we're exploring different options with that. So, all right. There were some questions about pricing. I'm happy to reach out to you, to the folks who asked about that afterward. We can talk a little bit about your environment. I know there's a mix of current customers and some folks who aren't customers on here. So, happy to take that offline with you and chat a little bit with you, and we can talk about pricing afterwards as well. Well, there is the last slide, which was up with my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if there are any questions afterwards. I wanted to thank Anat for walking through this with us today and answering any of the questions that came up. I don't see anything else coming up, so I think we'll let everyone go for the afternoon. But thank you all for attending. Have a great afternoon.